understanding of the fascination with Route 66. Not only my own interest in it, but just why it seemed to really fascinate people from all over the world. There's a lot of Europeans that travel to the States just to travel Route 66. Maybe not this year, but in most years. To date, I've traveled just over half of Route 66. The photos in this presentation were taken over the period of about 3 years and a number of different trips. But for the sake of some order, I'll present them as though I kind of took a single trip from Amarillo to Santa Monica Pier.
Amarillo to Santa Monica Pier.
So just a bit of background information about Route 66. It was one of the original highways in the US highway system. It was variously known as the Main Street of America, the Will Rogers Highway, and the Mother Road. I think the latter name came from the Grapes of Wrath. It was designated in 1926 and stretches for about 2,500 miles from Chicago to Los Angeles. It passes through 8 states: Illinois, Missouri, Kansas, Oklahoma, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, and California. It had a number of realignments over the years. The original plan really was to connect the main streets of communities along the way, providing them access to a major national thoroughfare. It became a major route for American migrants traveling to California in search of jobs during the Great Depression. And certainly Steinbeck's book, The Grapes of Wrath, kind of describes that era, and parts of the story certainly took place along Route 66. Became an important route during World War II for those traveling to California to work in war-related industries. And in the 1950s, it grew in popularity with vacationers. Its decline began later in the 50s with the signing of the Interstate Highway Act. And this act, instead of focusing on connecting communities, the interstates really focused on moving traffic between major destinations as quickly as possible. So quite a different shift in focus of what highways should do. Decommissioned in 1985, approximately 85% of Route 66 is still drivable. So that's actually a fair amount of it. A lot of it really is on other highways, like I-40, for example, really replaces quite a few sections of Route 66. But there's a lot of Route 66. Certainly the sections I was driving from Amarillo through Texas, New Mexico, the Route 66 in a lot of places became a service road and runs parallel to I-40. So there is still a separate road that's designated as Route 66. So just to give you an overview, Route 66 starts up there in Chicago, as I mentioned, travels through 7 states to end in Santa Monica here at Los Angeles.
Boy, look at Amboy is on the map.
Amboy is on the map. Dave.
Yeah.
Amboy is a famous, it's a well-known spot along Route 66.
So what's going on there near Albuquerque? There's 2 routes.
Oh, yeah, there's Route 66 did have talk about just a second.
Hello?
Hello, hi. Sorry, for some reason my microphone will cut out now and then. I still haven't figured out what's going on with it, so I'll try to catch it when it does. But anyway, I'll talk about a little bit about one of those realignments in presentation. But For example, Route 66 actually had over the years, three separate terminations in Los Angeles. Santa Monica Boulevard is the most, was the latest or the last termination of the road. So it changed, and sometimes the changes were essentially moving one street over in the town. So anyway, sorry, this slide is basically the section of Route 66 that I've traveled from Amarillo to Santa Monica Pier. So starting in Amarillo, one of the famous spots, photographic spots there certainly is Cadillac Ranch, which is a public arts installation. Originally, it was 10 Cadillacs with their noses buried in the ground. It was created in 1974 and moved from its original location when the city borders expanded or the city grew, and they moved it it's basically in the middle of a cow pasture on the edge of Amarillo. Visitors are encouraged to bring cans of spray paint and add their own decorations. It's a unique art installation. There's now only 9 Cadillacs because I think it wasn't that long ago, 3 or 4 years ago, I think one of the Cadillacs was burned. I think it was a bit of arson. So these photos, you can kind of see just some of the thick layers of, or get a feel for the thick layers of paint. And they say that it doesn't really matter what you spray on those because it's not going to last long. Somebody will come and spray over top of it anyway. So. But they are thickly covered in paint. So carrying on down the highway from Amarillo, Vega, Texas, it's sort of an example of a town that flourished during Route 66 heyday and has kind of struggled since the demise of Route 66. But it's got a few things to look at, like the historic Magnolia Petroleum Station or Magnolia Station. And a couple of other little sites, sort of an old secondhand store, and Route 66. You find a lot of quirkiness, a lot of weird stuff along the way, which is kind of fun to photograph. It sort of adds a special flavor to the highway. And a little further is actually the midpoint of Route 66. So this is how I can say I've officially traveled just a little over half of the total distance, because I started on the, from California, I started on the far side of the midpoint in Amarillo. The cafe there was closed when I was there. I should have checked it out a little better, because I had originally planned to do my sunrise shot at the Cadillac Ranch there and then leave Amarillo and shoot a few things along the way and have breakfast at the Midpoint Cafe. Unfortunately, I think it's only open from like April through October. So, and I was there in last December, which is why the cafe was closed. But apparently it's a fairly good little place, little diner. And although it's been suffering this year because of COVID and the lack of tourism, and particularly, the Route 66, a lot of the businesses have been hit because of the, lack of European tourists. Just a few more shots of Adrian, and of course, kind of a unique little pickup truck. So more, as I say, lots of quirkiness along the way. Right on the border of New Mexico and Texas is basically another border or ghost town, Glen Rio. And there's not much there other than some old buildings, old motel with trees growing through the rooms and whatnot. But all these places are kind of fun, interesting to photograph. San Juan, New Mexico, is another pretty much ghost town. Not much there other than an abandoned service station and some faded signs. So the first real community of any size west of Amarillo is Tucumcari. And there's lots of evidence of Route 66 in Tucumcari. Town itself is talking to, when I have stopped for lunch, is talking to the owner of the restaurant, and he was saying that Tucumcari is kind of still trying to overcome a couple of, almost like a double whammy. It was at one time a fairly major railway hub, and the railway moved that out of Tucumcari, and of course all the workers along with it. And then when I-40 bypassed the city, they lost that Route 66 traffic as well. But still lots of evidence, some restored gas stations, and lots of old signs, neon signs. Blue Swallow Court is one that you often see photographs of. I have another photograph later that is a view that you tend to see more often in guidebooks and so on. So neon signs are kind of fun too. There's lots of them along the way, and if you can be in one of these towns around the blue hour, it's a great time for photographing the neon signs. Carrying on through New Mexico, Santa Rosa. I did stop for lunch at the Comet 2 drive-in. Long gone are the days of car hops, but you can dine inside, and I can attest that they have a extremely delicious green chili stew. That's basically all I needed for lunch. So just west of Santa Rosa, the highway splits, as Jeff questioned earlier. The pre-1937 alignment goes up through Albuquerque. Pardon me, goes up through Santa Fe, or you can take the post-1937 alignment, which continues more or less westward into Albuquerque. Either way, you'll eventually end up in Albuquerque, but obviously it's a little longer if you go up through Santa Fe. Santa Fe itself, if you haven't been there, is a beautiful city to visit. There's lots of art galleries, good restaurants, some great Spanish architecture, especially around their sort of main park or the Santa Fe Plaza. But not a lot of evidence of its Route 66 history. I think for the most part, it's just because, it's been so long. It was 1937 when they realigned Route 66, and it no longer went through Santa Fe. So really, Santa Fe only had maybe a 10 or 12 year association with Route 66, which may explain why we really don't see any evidence of Route 66. The odd, as you're traveling up that alignment and back down into Albuquerque, there is the odd little sign and so on, but not very much at all. But the city is certainly worth visiting, and I say lots of great old architecture. And sometimes if you're standing in the right place at the right time, an old vintage car drives by to give you kind of a unique photo.